Good morning and welcome to the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research virtual briefing. We are glad to have so many of you with us today. I'm Madeline O'Connor. I'm the Director of Communications here at FFAR, and I will be joined on the webinar today by Dr. Sally Rockey, FFAR's Executive Director, and our guest speaker, Andy Levine, who is CEO of the American Seed Trade Association and President of the NCFAR Board. Most of you are familiar with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, but for those who aren't, I'll just give a brief introduction to FFAR, who we are and how we work, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Rockey to speak more about our progress and what we've done this year, and then give you a preview of some upcoming projects. So as many of you know, FFAR is a nonprofit created through bipartisan congressional support in the 2014 Farm Bill. We're governed by a board of directors and advised by expert councils, and we work to complement the great work of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The FFAR model is flexible and nimble. As a 501c3 organization, we're able to move quite quickly and evaluate priorities as they arise. We double the taxpayer investment with a required dollar-for-dollar match, and we collaborate with both public and private sector partners, which you'll hear more about later in the presentation. Our vision is a world in which ever-innovating and collaborative science provides every person access to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. A little bit more about how we work. I mentioned that we have a dollar-for-dollar matching model. In the 2014 Farm Bill, we were given the great gift of $200 million from the American taxpayer. So with each research project, we work to match our own investment and will eventually deliver $400 million at least into food and agriculture research. Of course, with our matching requirement and our goal to bring multiple groups together with every project, public-private partnerships are core to our operating model. So that's something that we work to do with every project we engage with. I mentioned our board and our advisory councils. This is just a quick look at our structure. Of course, we have a board of directors overseeing our strategy and priorities, and then we have an advisory councils who I'll speak more about a bit later, and our executive director, who you'll hear from shortly. This is our board. We're very proud to have a great group of board members advising us on all that we do in food and agriculture research. I won't read them, but this list is also available on our website. Our advisory councils consist of more than 60 industry leaders, farmers, producers, scientists, and experts who give us specialized advice and counsel on our research programs. Each challenge area has a council of experts to help us look at the scientific priorities and the best opportunities within those areas. So as you all know, stakeholder input is critical to making sure that the research we fund will actually make an impact in the field. So we really do take this piece of our operating model very seriously. We look for input from government, scientists, producers, consumers, and industry. And you'll be hearing a lot more about how we do that when we talk about our convening events. Also wanted to highlight Dr. Rockey's recent testimony before the Senate Agriculture Committee. There was a research hearing on June 15th. Many of you may be aware. We wanted to provide this example of engaging with the congressional audience and making the case for ag research and its importance to the U.S. economy and our farmers. So Dr. Rockey is a great advocate for science, all sciences, but especially now in her current role for the agricultural sciences. We believe in the power of research to elevate food and ag for the public's benefit. Another example of how we bring different groups together is our convening events. These events are how we develop our research programs. So we bring together scientists, producers, industry representatives, and other stakeholders at our convening events. We start with an idea of where we think we might want to go, and we bring together these individuals who are familiar with that area and how we could make an impact to make sure that FFAR is really funding where we can actually see benefits and whether they're for producers, consumers, the environment, or all of the above. A little bit about our review process to go into a little bit of detail about kind of how FFAR works. As I mentioned, the board sets our overall priorities and parameters. The first step of funding research is developing the concept. Any research concept, sort of a seed of an idea, is cleared by the executive director, the board, and the advisory councils. Once we have a proposal, it goes through 2 levels of peer review. So the first level is by experts, and the second level is by our advisory councils, who look at the top ranked proposals for alignment with FFAR goals and to make sure that we are funding a balanced portfolio of scientific research. And of course, final funding decisions are approved by the executive director. Also wanted to mention that reviewers must abide by a conflict of interest policy and non-disclosure agreement. Applications are always evaluated by an independent external peer review panel. Our research funds may be awarded in 3 ways: competitive grants, direct contracts, or prizes and challenges. And I've mentioned our challenge areas. These are the 7 areas where we're currently focusing the bulk of our research. Dr. Rockey will talk in more specific terms about our scientific priorities, but these are our 7 challenge areas. It is now my pleasure to introduce FFAR Executive Director, Dr. Sally Rockey. Before I turn it over to Dr. Rockey, I'd like to give a brief introduction for those who don't know, though I expect the majority of you on the line are very familiar with FFAR's inaugural executive director. Before joining FFAR in the fall of 2015, Dr. Rockey spent 30 years as a leader in federal government research. Her time leading extramural research at both USDA and the National Institutes of Health has informed her perspective on the connection between agriculture and health. As anyone who has heard Dr. Rockey speak is well aware, her passion for advocating for science and the ways in which it impacts our lives is unmatched. With that, I welcome Dr. Rockey to take the floor.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm looking forward to sharing updates on all of our FFAR progress and outlining our future, and also answering any questions that you might have at the end of the program. First of all, our Farm Bill activities have been very active. We are looking for the next Farm Bill to be reauthorized and fully funded in the Farm Bill, and we've been working very closely with the congressional staff. As you know, this is a challenging time for Congress, and budgetary challenges are very large. So we are looking towards and working with Congress to see what our future may hold. But your support that we've received as far as advancing our mission has been fantastic, and we thank you all for that. Many of you on the line have signed a letter of support for FFAR that was initiated by the National Coalition of Food and Agriculture Research. And to date, we have 85 organizations that have joined us today. Then that letter has gone up to the Hill and will go up to the Hill again as we add more members to the letter. So I want to thank you again for all of you who have participated and lent your support towards this very unique and innovative program. So I wanted to start by telling you about 2017 and everything that's been going on. We are a small organization that really began about 2 years ago when I came on board, but we're hitting our strides and we're cranking on all cylinders. So there's a lot that's been happening in the last year. First of all, we have invested right now $58 million in our food and in the form of grants. That is with our matching funds. We've granted 36, we've made 36 awards, and we have up to 50 different donors and funders as part of these grants. Now that is with the match. By the end of this year, we believe that we, with our match, will have obligated about $200 million with over 60 awards and 65 partners and funders. So those are the numbers, but there's a lot of innovation built into those numbers. So let me tell you about some of the projects that we've been working on. You may have heard a couple months ago, we launched a private-public partnership called Crops of the Future Collaborative, and you can see at the bottom of these slides the companies and organizations that have joined us on this collaborative. The idea of this collaborative is to look for important agricultural traits that would typically not be pursued by any one single company, and to work on these traits together to find the pathways to the genes so that we can promote traits that either increase nutrition, make plants resilient to environmental conditions, and or increase yield. And so the groups that are represented on this slide will work together as an executive team. These are our founding members, and will decide on the research that's going to get us to the traits of interest. We will likely add additional companies and additional organizations as well as additional crops to this collaborative as we move forward. And we're having our first executive committee meeting next week of the collaborative. So this is a really exciting opportunity for our community to work together and move forward together. Pam Johnson, who is on our board, who was very, very involved in the plant genome project and the corn genome project that went on in the 90s, was quoted as saying, "This collaborative research with public and private partners will build on the investments already made in ag research, so farmers like me can see the return on those investments through improvements in our field." Pam Johnson is a member of the FFAR board. She has been dedicated to science as a bringing information and solutions to farmers, and her support of science has been truly remarkable. So we want to thank Pam for everything she does for our organization. Secondly, we put out a call for all of our challenge areas. As Madeline had mentioned, we have 7 challenge areas, and we put out a call to allow individuals with innovative ideas to come in and compete for funding in all 7 of those areas. This was called Seeding Solutions. We have in the process of making 9 grants, and each of these grants is can be up to $1 million of FAR funding, along with $1 million of matching funding that the grantees brought in to the project. We just announced our first grant on Monday, but we'll be announcing the other 8 very soon. This was the Foundation for Agronomic Research, was coordinating a team in 8 locations to link nutrient management practices with practical outcome for production and natural resource conservation. So you'll see a lot of innovation coming out of that space. The ROAR program, or Rapid Outcomes from Agricultural Research, is a program that can demonstrate the nimbleness of our foundation. This program is to look for emerging and re-emerging pests and pathogens on farm, where FAR can quickly move in and put some important research funding on these projects prior to and serve as a bridge to more traditional funding sources that may come in later. This is, we work very fast in this area. The applicant comes in with an identified match, and we can actually review the application in a week's time and make a grant soon thereafter. So it moves very, very rapidly. And we also have USDA representation on looking at whether or not these particular applications are complementary to what they're doing in their work. This slide shows you the 3 grants that we've made so far on Brucella Suisse and swine and cattle, on spotted wing Drosophila and tart cherry trees, and on bacterial leaf streak in corn, at University of Wyoming and Texas A&M, Michigan State University, Colorado State, University of Nebraska, and University of Illinois. So these are very important projects that we ask that the applicants also show us the support that they have received from industry to pursue these kinds of research. We funded a project with the World Wildlife and Walmart Foundation Our joint investment of 1.3 million is on looking at how to maximize crop utilization and edible food recovery. This project falls in our food loss and food waste challenge area. It's with not only WWF and Walmart Foundation, but with the University of California and the Global Cold Chain Alliance. So this is really a multi partnership among a number of groups to look at on-farm efficiencies to reduce to allow for edible food recovery. You probably heard our very first grant that we made for research was the National Cover Crop Initiative with our great partners, the Noble Research Institute. This was a $6.6 million investment on the part of Noble and FFAR and a number of other organizations. The idea here is to really look at where there's needed resources in cover crop, germplasm, genetic materials, and in developing new kinds of cover crops that will be adopted to particular crops and to particular soils and environments. As we know, we're trying to increase the acreage on which cover crops and other soil health promoting practices are used, and this project will be really instrumental in providing the resources needed to expand the use of cover crops. We also entered into a fabulous new prize at the National Academy of Sciences. We and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation jointly sponsored this prize. It's really a prestigious prize that is conferred on a mid-career scientist, and it is a $100,000 personal prize to the investigators. And we were so proud that a USDA ARS scientist, Dr. Ed Buckler, was the inaugural winner. He works at Cornell, and he has done groundbreaking work in developing modified corn with increased vitamin A, so his work has an enormous impact on the health of the world. So we are looking for the second round of this prize, which I'll talk to you about in just a few minutes. There are 3 RFAs that were issued in 2017 that are now closed, and we're reviewing those applications. We had the Pollinator Health Fund. We made a commitment to fund understanding multi-pollinator stressors and develop best management practices and enhance outreach and education in pollinators. Our animal welfare and productivity is a $2 million program to improve the welfare and production of egg-laying hens and commercially raised pigs. And finally, our Sustainable American Agriculture is a $5 million program from FFAR with a $5 million match for research to advance innovative research in sustainable fish and shellfish production, where we believe there is enormous potential for increased markets for farmed fish and shellfish. And we also supported with or funded with the Supporters of Agriculture Research, or SOAR, to establish a project at the National Academy of Sciences called Science Breakthroughs 2030, Strategy for Food and Agriculture Research. This is a really incredible study to look for moonshots that will guide food and agricultural research for the future. If any of you have an opportunity to engage with this process, we'd love to have you. We're really looking for that innovation space where the new kind of sciences, whether they be more traditional kinds of sciences or sciences from other fields, will impact agriculture and propel the whole area forward and accelerate our ability to strengthen our agricultural systems. So if you get a chance to be part of their programs, and they're having a number of town halls and other ways to resource or to collect input, please do so. That would be great. Then I'm going to take an outward look at FFAR and where we're going in our future. The next slide shows you our challenge areas as you know them today. We are working in specific areas under those challenge areas because those challenge areas can be broad. So the slideshow shows you the subtopic areas, and we're going to be pursuing these areas and subtopics between now and 2019. But I'm really excited about our future, and we know that these challenge areas might change in the future, and that's where we need the kind of input from the community to help us think through how these challenge areas may either evolve within the challenge areas or whole new challenge areas might occur. So we're going to have a meeting in October for public input, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But but our many of you are aware our grant making, what our grant making will look like will really depend on what happens in the next farm bill. But I truly believe that if we are reauthorized and fully funded the next farm bill, we're just going to be able to move so rapidly on some of these innovative projects that we see come across our table. And we remain committed to a perpetual foundation. We believe ourselves as an institution and not simply an experiment. So, as I said earlier, we are working with the Senate Agricultural Committee staff as we work to create new revenue streams, not only for us, but also for making a case for the importance of agricultural research and its impact on the people around the world. So also, as you noted with our crops of the future, but in a number of other areas, crop improvement has been a focus of ours. Some things like doubling photosynthetic capacity, which can increase yield by extraordinary up to 40%. How we have plants that are more water efficient, and taking advantage of the latest technologies and applying them to our breeding programs are things and areas that you're going to hear more about from us very soon. We also, one of our first programs that we launched as an organization was our Early Career Awards. FFAR is charged with also considering the next generation of scientists and assuring that we have strong scientific expertise going forward to work on issues of agriculture in the future. So we started the new innovator program and awarded 9 innovators in 2016. These are individuals who are at the first phase of their tenure track or faculty positions. They have to be within 3 years of their faculty position. We're really trying to capture these young, talented people at the early stage and get them a significant grant so that they will continue to focus their research efforts on agriculture. As you know, agricultural scientists, as all other scientists, have to be entrepreneurs to find funding for their research. And oftentimes, if there's not a large bolus of funding available, they will redirect their research in areas where they can receive funding. So we want these individuals to stay in agriculture, because once you get your first grant, that usually breeds success in the future. So we give them a fairly significant grant of up to $200,000 a year, which is FAR contribution along with the match for 3 years. So they get a very large $600,000 grant to pursue their research and take them where the and go in the directions that the research is going to take them into innovative space. You will also be hearing from us on a couple of other fostering the future, as we call it, next generation programs that will be helping students and postdocs and prepare best for the positions that they're going to hold in the future. As I said earlier, we have current funding opportunities. Our ROAR program has always an open opportunity. So if anything happens where a pest or pathogen emerges, you can quickly come to FFAR. There is no deadlines for that. And we just announced our Tipping Points pilot. We're accepting letters of intent through September 13th. This is a very unique program that looks at community-based food access programs and how they interact together. We're going to do some incredible system dynamic modeling that helps us understand how these programs interact with each other, what leads to the success of the programs at a community level, and see how it has a positive health outcome and increased economic opportunities within that community.
So as I mentioned, there's going to be quite a few things you're going to be hearing about that we can't really announce at this point, because until grants are made, we often cannot give you insight into what we're doing, but we are going to be announcing quite a few things in the next few months. You will, of course, the ones that I mentioned are among the remaining awards for this year. You see here below. I've mentioned all of these, but there will be quite a few other things happening as well. So how to get involved? First of all, we will, every year, we're required to have a public meeting. That is going to happen at 11 o'clock on October 6th. There'll be an open invitation that will be forthcoming that will allow you to provide comments either in person at the meeting or to provide written feedback to the FFAR board. If you would like, please subscribe to our FFAR e-news that you can receive details, and then you'll hear more information about our open meeting. And we are looking to have your presentations include information of what you are thinking about our challenge areas and also where our challenge areas may go in the future. So we're excited to hear from the community and to see how our challenge areas are meeting up with what your expectations are, but also where there might be new innovation that is either not currently included in a challenge area or could be included in a challenge area, or perhaps the development of a new challenge area. So we're looking forward to hearing your comments on October 6th. I also want to mention that right now the National Academy, the second round of to decide who will be the winner of the NAS Prize in Food and Agricultural Sciences, that is open for nominations through October 2nd. Remember those individuals, so you may nominate individuals for this prize. That those individuals have to be mid-career. If you go onto their website at the web address below, they'll give you all the descriptors of what the characteristics of the individual are in their career, and you can nominate individuals to the National Academy. It's a very rigorous review by a panel of the National Academy scientists, and they'll be looking forward to receiving outstanding individual nominees. So you can subscribe to our newsletter, as I just mentioned below, and get more information about the public meetings as well as many of the other meetings. You can attend an event. As Madeline had pointed out to you, one of our goals in helping set programming for FFAR is to have convening events. Convening events allow us to bring stakeholders, producers, industry, academics, the federal government, and ourselves together to talk about research priorities and to agree upon as a community what are the top innovative research areas that are filling white spaces and gaps that we can go after, and then what we should do first. So we have a number of these happening this fall in many of our challenge areas, and here they all are. You can see them where they're going to be. So our public board meeting is on the 6th. We're having 2 meetings at the Tri-Society meetings in Tampa. One is on plant efficiency, water efficiency in particular. And the second one is looking at open source adaptive management tools, so decision tools. One of the things that we've had presented to us often by the community is decision support tools and questions of whether or not FFAR would help develop decision support tools. So we're bringing the community together to try to work as a community to decide how we might move together as a community to support an open source framework for decision support. We are going to have crops and controlled environments on November 13th. That's really about vertical farming and other contained environments. That we'll let you know where that's going to be. Food waste and food security will be at APLU here in Washington on November 16th. We will be talking about our innovation pathway convening event on November 30th through December 1st. That also will be at APLU on November 30th and December 1st. And then on December 4th, we're having sustainable livestock production at the Academy here at Washington, D.C. Now, depending on the convening event, there may be a public session and there may not be. So we'll let you know all of the processes from that, but we do try to have for the convening event some ways that members of the public can at least provide input to the convening event, but most of them will be invite only or have a small session that will be open to the public for input. So you can always engage with us. We're a small staff, but we love to hear innovative ideas. So if you have innovative ideas, you can come onto our online portal. You can submit in two ways. One, to the challenge areas. If your idea aligns with one of our challenge areas, but we don't have an open request for that area, you can submit there. And then secondly, if you have something that's outside of our challenge areas, you can submit that, and we would like to hear that. It's just that we are concentrating primarily on our challenge areas, so ideas outside of our challenge areas with our limited funding probably will get less consideration. However, we are always open for that really innovative idea that's going to take us to the next level. So feel free to submit those if you have some of those very creative, innovative ideas. And then, of course, you're able to, if you have general questions or ideas or comments for us, please just contact us at the foundationfar.org, contact us page or web link, and we'll be happy to hear any of your comments for us. So I'd be happy now to answer any questions you might have.
If anyone has a question, go ahead and click the far right side of your screen to get to the chat box, and we will answer those as they come in. So feel free to go ahead.
So I will read the question and then answer it for you. Can applicants leverage local state government agency funding from non-federal sources aligned with the proposed project towards FFAR's 1.1 cost sharing? New funding not yet executed for complementary projects with overlapping objectives? And the answer is yes. In fact, that is how much of our funding comes about. The only caution that I would have, it can be state or local government. It can also be other federal government, other governments itself. It just can't be U.S. federal government funds. So yes, you can use that. We do have a requirement that the funding for the match will be expended during the course of the grant. So if you have spent money on the project prior to the initiation, you cannot count that as a match. But yes, you can, and oftentimes that's the way that we do fund our match. We have a question from Tom O'Connell that says it appears that most, if not all, of the partnerships as far deal with, deal with on-farm production. Do you see a future where post-harvest research with manufacturers' processes will be addressed? Yes, we are very interested in that. In fact, even our Crops of the Future collaborative includes post-harvest traits that will be very important. Our food waste and loss will obviously include post-harvest research and manufacturing, and a number of our other challenge areas as well. So yes, we are. Although most of our work so far has been on farm, we include the entire value chain, and that also includes economic research as well. Jennifer Olson asked, do you find any research addressing the challenges internationally, such as in developing countries? Yes. In fact, we are working on a number of collaboratives that have an international slant to them. Of course, agriculture is global, and while our focus has been on U.S. agriculture, we certainly have engaged in global issues and with global entities and international entities, and we'll continue to do that. So yes, we can. Now, I will say that we look for places where there's space for us. Since we're a small organization, we have to be laser focused on what we're going to do. So with global questions that have not been funded by other organizations is really what we deal with on the international front. Sophia asked, if Congress is late reauthorizing the Farm Bill, what happens to FFAR in the interim? Well, we're going to all take off for Tahiti. No, I'm just joking. We have our funding right now, and the way that we work is that we fund incrementally, which means that if I give you a 5-year award, I give you each of those funding by year. So we will have still funding available to us come 2018, and we believe our corpus will not be obligated down until sometime in early 2019. So we're hopeful that the Farm Bill decisions will be made by that time, and then we'll be off and running for the next round. Jennifer McMillan asked, does FFAR provide any assistance in matchmaking or connectivity with likely prospective partners on the private sector? Yes, we do. Let me just explain how our matching would work. In the best of all worlds, we would go out and we would match, find individual donors and partners who would put up the money for example, a request for application. Then the grantee themselves would not have to worry about the match. But because matching can be very problematic, we are flexible in that some programs require the applicant to come up with the match, and some programs already have the match built into our program. We do help, though, in soliciting match. So, for example, in our tipping points, it's going both ways. We're having our applicants submit potential matchers, and we will go out and our national partners, and we will go out and solicit funding from those partners. We also then know who our partners currently have been, and if it's an area we know of interest when looking for match, we can suggest matching partners. So we can do it in all sorts of different ways. I'm not sure who this is, but a person has asked, do you see a future where support for instrumentation for university labs will be available? Yes, not specifically for our program. For example, we won't have an instrumentation program because we're too small to do that. There are some instrumentation programs in the USDA and in other federal agencies that support scientific research. However, you can ask for instrumentation in a specific grant or project. So depending on the size of that, you are able to ask for it even in our grant. So it depends again. Now we are probably not going to be able to support very large pieces of equipment because that would occupy so much of the space of the grant, but typical instrumentation that's required to pursue the grants is perfectly legitimate request within a grant application. What level of funding are you asking for in the Farm Bill and are confident of congressional support? Well, we're asking for full funding. So if you think about what full funding means, we are very hopeful that we will again be reauthorized at the $200 million level. We've had incredible support from Congress. We've worked very closely with them at every level all along since FFAR began, and we keep them updated regularly in the activities that are going on with FFAR. I think all of us recognize what a difficult budget climate this is, so I think that's the deciding factor in funding a program. We believe, though, that we are an institution and not just an experiment. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to start a program like ours and in the midst of it end it. Really, with 3 years in scientific research, it's a very short time. So we're very hopeful. I'm quite confident that Congress sees the value of our program and sees the innovation and the research that we're supporting. So I'm very hopeful for our future. Toby, does FFAR determine the best models for public-private partnerships when responding to a call for proposals? Is this driven by applicants or are there models prescribed by FFAR? So again, that's a good question that relates to the question I just answered. In some cases, we will have the funding already or the partnership already set up. Our Crops of the Future Collaborative is an example of that. We have our partners in line, and we will be funding research probably at academic organizations that are supported by all the partners. In other cases, we let you decide who the partners will be, who those are interested in yours, so it can go either way. Now, the model, as we know, it's a very competitive world out there, so one of the things that we do, we know what many of the companies and the organizations are interested in, and so we know which of those organizations we can approach on specific topic areas that are more likely to be open and receptive to the type of research we're going to do. So we share that, of course, with the community as well. Next by Mallory Sanborn. The question is the protein challenge open to plant-based forms of protein? And the answer is yes. In the challenge, in the feeding solutions, we took both applications on animal-based and plant-based proteins. It is true that most of our emphasis at this point has been on livestock and sustainable livestock production and looking at ways that we can mitigate the impact of livestock production and also improve the efficiency of livestock production. But we are also looking for work in plant-based proteins as well. Bob Danka asked, the February announcement of Pollinator Health Fund indicated $10 million commitment to this area and that $4 million was available in the initial RFA. Will there be another RFA for that fund? We don't know at this point. We are looking at the applications and ultimately what grants we fund. There could be another possibility for another RFA or some direct funding as well. Maria Toshkavas asks, would FAR be willing to do some infrastructure project investments like building new kinds of facilities to experiment with agriculture, GMO contaminants, et cetera? The answer there is basically no. We're not big enough to support those kind of facilities, although we've had a number of requests for infrastructure support. We are unable to do construction. That is prohibited from our farm bill, in the Farm Bill. But again, we can think about things like equipment and other things that be necessary. But it'd be unlikely that we be actually funding infrastructure. We have talked as a community about infrastructure support as being research infrastructure support being part of the overarching infrastructure initiatives that Congress and the White House is taking up. We want research to be part of that because there are dire needs in agriculture research as well as all the other research areas. Agriculture research being in some of the most dire needs of all of the research areas. So we're hopeful that research will be considered in any infrastructure program that comes forth from Congress. Bob, hi Bob. Bob is a friend of mine. Bob McDonald says, will you continue to require matching funds for new innovative programs? At this point, yes, we are still requiring matching funds. I know it is difficult for ARS who can't use their own internal funds as our match since we require a non-federal match. We are looking for sponsors of our new innovators. That would be a delightful way to overcome this problem, but at this point, we've been unable to locate sponsors. It's about a $2.5 million program per year. But we'll continue to seek out sponsors for the new innovators. Jennifer McMillan says, understanding that FAR does not want to overlap with USDA funding, what would you recommend is the best way or resource to stay on top of what USDA priorities are so that there is no overlap? Well, for us as an organization, not only do we have USDA as vital partners on our board, but we meet regularly with them. We also have a process by which we send our concepts to the USDA to have them talk to us about whether or not these are complementary to what they're doing so that we can avoid duplication of areas and also really work in those areas that are white spaces and gaps. Of course, for the USDA itself, with its intramural programs, you can find out a lot of information about them from ARS's website or the Economic Research Service website, and of course, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, NIFA, puts out all of its requests for applications and its strategic plan, so you can see what they're interested in as well. Now, granted, I think there's probably no piece of research that you could do that wouldn't have some overlap with something in the USDA. They're a big organization that funds over $3 billion of research a year. That's why it's so important to us to have USDA as our partners so we can not only see how we support the mission of the USDA, but really work together on the white spaces and gaps. Let's see. Okay, so Greg Engelke, I'm sorry if I mangled your name there. who owns the IP that may come out of research projects. So that really depends on the research and who is doing the research and at what phase the research is in. We're a foundation, so we have an ability to negotiate IP and also to own IP that comes out of the research, as long as we feed any revenues from the IP back into our program, as we're a nonprofit organization. However, in general, most of our programs who are funded, when we fund a university, we abide by BIDOL, which is the law that allows the IP to be owned by the grantee, as long as the grantor has certain rights to those IP. But there's a couple of cases whereby we have much more applied research that is further along on the pipeline that may be supported by industry, or that we fund industry, that we may negotiate the IP to either have non-exclusive licensing, to get a piece of the royalties, or other such measures where part of the IP can come back to us as an organization. So basically, each grant is negotiated for its IP individually. So we don't have an overarching policy, because our grants are so different. Every grant is quite different, and also the grantees are quite different. Carolyn Mutter asked, is FAR interested in agricultural systems modeling that considers likely future challenges, including impacts on climate, pests, land use, sustainability, global trade, or is the focus mostly on the near term? Similarly, is FAR interested in the use of models to project not just yield, but nutrition from food in the present and future? Oh, yes, we're very interested in modeling. We funded the beginning of a project called Crops in Silico at the University of Illinois, which is a fascinating modeling project which brings in all sorts of plant models. So you basically could make predictions using virtual plants that are inside a computer to determine what its impact is going to be on either by environmental change or by what its nutritional traits might look like, or et cetera. While we consider ourselves more short-term as far as the research, the long-term goals can be very important. We do a lot of modeling. There can be modeling. As I said, one of the projects, many of our projects have modeling in them. As I said, our tipping points is all about system dynamics modeling of food access programs, and there's a number of others. So there's also a very interesting area that we have we're working on in part through our animal health program, but in general is how do we predict how changing practices and changing agricultural conventions are going to impact the future of a particular commodity. So, for example, in the case of our animal welfare program on cage-free chickens, we've moved towards cage-free in many cases, but there's a lot of scientific impacts, or there's a lot of things that happen in a cage-free environment that don't happen in a contained environment. So how do we predict what those things are? How can we get some science ahead of the changing practices that are going on, or production practices that are going on? And so that, in part, will take modeling. So we're interested in all of that. It just, again, depends on the project. Tom O'Connell again, similar to my previous question, will FAR explore food safety research and at the post-harvest level? We have, Tom, we have specifically stayed somewhat away from food safety in that there is a large piece of funding, not only at NIH, but at USDA in food safety. We know there's some very critical issues in food safety, but because of our limited resources, we try to hone in on areas that were ripe for influxes of funding. Not to say that we wouldn't consider some in purpose with our ROAR program for the same reason, because we were concerned about the amount of food safety projects we might get post-farm that could be dealt with and are oftentimes dealt with by other organizations. We stay primarily away from food safety issues. So again, I want to thank all of you for participating. We're really looking forward to your input in whatever way you can give us. If you, again, can come to a competing event, or you're certainly able to add sending concepts to us, we would love to hear from you. Good luck to all of you, and thanks again for participating.